in the year 1989, I was actually in London. I left Czechoslovakia in 1978. I emigrated with my parents because our whole family was politically persecuted. So both my parents lost their jobs after 1968 because they were connected with the Prague Spring, and they were both banned from publishing anything. My father was a writer, a satirist, and my mother was a journalist. And then in 1972 they were both arrested, imprisoned, and that was the year when I graduated from high school. So I was barred from access to higher education. I tried 8 times, and eventually in 1977 we applied to be allowed to emigrate. I came to Germany first, then ended up in London, and in November 1989 I was actually at home on maternity leave, so I followed it fervently on television. Until then I never knew that there were so many news bulletins. I sat there and watched every single one, and it was so exciting, especially watching the events in Bratislava, because I knew many of the people who spoke on the rostrums, and so it was just a fantastic feeling. When I left in 1978, I never thought that the regime would actually fall within 11 years. So suddenly this meant that I was able to go back. I thought I would never see my friends and family. So that was one important way. The other way was since the early 1980s, when I came to London, I worked for Amnesty International because the organization adopted my father as prisoner of conscience. So I worked on cases of political prisoners, mostly in the Soviet Union. And then since 1984-85, when Gorbachev came to power under Perestroika, many people were released from prison. But it seemed that in Czechoslovakia nothing was going to move. But then suddenly, November 1989 changed it all. And that meant for me professionally that from working on cases of human rights violations in these countries, I started working on helping to establish the organization of Amnesty International throughout Eastern and Central Europe. So I traveled a lot, and it was really wonderful to see the movement flourish. And the most memorable moment for me was when a group was established in my hometown, Bratislava, and I was there and I was interviewed for a short TV shot against the backdrop of the Bratislava castle, and that was something that would have just seemed completely unbelievable only a few years earlier. Well, at the time it was tremendous exhilaration, great hope and promise. Sadly, not all of these promises have been, or not all of these hopes have been fulfilled, but still it is wonderful to see that censorship has been removed. People, at least in what was Czechoslovakia, are not imprisoned for political reasons. So that is generally, on a personal level, I was very sad that my father didn't live to see the day. He died in 1981. But on the other hand, that year, 1989, is the year when my daughter was born. I brought this record. This is a record by Karel Kryl, a Czech singer-songwriter. The record is called Bratříčku, zavírej vrátka, Little Brother, Shut the Gate. This is a seminal record. It was published in 1968, and the songs, the protest songs, lyrics are very poetic, basically speak of the despair and the protest against the Soviet-led invasion of Czechoslovakia. Now, this is a different sleeve than most people know because the record also played a role in my father's imprisonment. One of the charges against him was that he played this record, which was officially published in Czechoslovakia and was only banned after it had sold out. So he was charged with playing this record at home to more than one person, 2 in fact. So this was regarded as incitement. So the secret police confiscated this record, But when we emigrated, we bought this exile edition, which came out in Sweden. And we first lived in Munich, where my mother worked for Radio Free Europe, and Karel Kryl was a colleague of hers. And so this record has a dedication from him. So it's something that's very close to my heart. And then in 1989, one of the most amazing memories for me is watching the footage from the concert that was held, I think, on the 2nd of December, Concert for All Decent People, at which Karel Kryl made a triumphant comeback, and he sang his songs to a crowd of 15,000, and everyone was singing along, and people had tears streaming down their faces. And I think that was a profoundly moving moment.